what sort of tips would you give current high school students who are trying to sit down and write an essay for ancient history, for example? Because I know that one of the areas that most students do struggle with is the essay writing component of really any, history, English, etc.
Oh, absolutely, and I get that. Do you mean sitting down and writing it as in just the willpower and the procrastination, or the skill?
The actual skill,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, the skill is clear structure. As it's been drilled into people from year 7, beginning, middle, end, so opening, introduction, the paragraph body, and ending, that's clear. Within it, you're almost certainly going to have an argument you're making, and make sure it is explicitly clear what argument you are making. You never want the person who's marking it to not know where you're going. And that's something it's very easy to be too smart for your own good, be too clever, and
So not to be clear, to try to create a complex argument that isn't essential.
A complex argument isn't a bad thing, as long as it's clear.
Yes,
as long as it's clear, and the complexity is a sign of sort of sophistication and less sort of verbosity.
And so, how do you, looking at a question, come up with a complex argumental thesis? Because I know, again, that's a very common issue many students have. How would you go about that when you were preparing for?
Well, for the most part, depends on which subject. Sorry, pardon me. For the most part, hopefully, I should have done a question like that sometime in the past, having done a practice essay. I'm sorry. For the most part, I've done a practice essay similar to that in the past, so I can just use my experience from that rather didn't. But if it's totally new, what I do is I just break it down into like a mind map. It's good for some people. I'm more of a list person, so I write down ideas, concepts, examples, evidence that I think is appropriate, and then I restructure it together. Even if it's a question that I haven't seen before, often you can use similar arguments or similar ideas and break it down together, which is why I always don't recommend rote learning essays, as many teachers don't, because it just means you don't have the flexibility. It's much better to rote learn sort of essay structures, because then you can break them down and take points. You've got to be willing to say, okay, I like paragraph 2 of my rote learned structure, but it's not appropriate for this question. It's just me going on a rant that doesn't have any relevance. I'm going to drop that. And being able to learn those structures and be more flexible with those structures and in applying them is much more conducive to flexibility and creativity and thinking about things, which is ultimately what English history are about, than say just rote learning an essay, because then you're just going to be flummoxed when you have to write it. If you're still having trouble coming up with ideas, then talk to people. Talk about people. Then break it down into, instead of trying to write an essay, write down a list of, say, concepts and ideas, and not necessarily hugely sophisticated ideas, but just basics that require basic analysis, and then you can begin to understand.